This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Honoring the Journey, hosted by me, Leslie Neese, a former Christian radio host, speaker and writer, and contestant on Survivor China, known as Sister Christian. Since then, I've been deconstructing my theological beliefs, and Honoring the Journey offers you deep and meaningful conversations about all things faith and deconstruction. We also dive into different faith practices, ideas, and ways to connect with the divine without religious baggage. Subscribe to Honoring the Journey, and let's honor someone's journey together today.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Nat Turney. I'm here with my brother, John. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
And our lovely friend, Bethany. Say, what's up, Bethany?
Hey, guys. How are you doing? How's it going in Texas, Nat? How's the weather
it's hot.
there?
It's real hot. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't fear. It'll be cold again. Because, we're the I think we're the originators of that phrase, like if you don't like the weather, just wait a few minutes, it'll change.
Yeah.
So it was.
You own a coffee shop, and so do you find yourself like having more blended drinks on hot days and hot drinks on cold days?
When we first opened, we've been open almost 5 years now. When we first opened, it was very seasonal, and now it's just it's just the same stuff all the time.
Okay.
People who drink iced coffee drink it in the dead of winter. They drink it when it's 110 degrees outside. People who drink hot stuff don't care. I don't know. It's a strange.
Yeah.
The one thing I don't get is matcha. I don't understand.
Oh, nope. I don't like it at all. It tastes like I'm eating grass. But some people like that. So I'm not here to judge.
Yeah,
I am. Ever since I really sort of departed from, traditional Christianity or religion at all, I find it very liberating because now I can judge like hell.
Now you can judge. Okay, good job.
There's no one to tell me not to judge. I'm going to judge the hell out of that.
There's a silver lining for you.
You want to drink green crap? Go ahead. But I am sitting here shaking my head and wondering what the hell you're thinking. But, Anyway, as the title that you clicked on would suggest, this is the podcast that we call This Is Not Church because, for a variety of reasons. But chief among them is if it was church, you would have left by now. But also because we all come from a church background. And regardless of where we sit in relationship to that now, there's no denying that it's shaped and formed us in some way. And so we sort of tend to see the world through a lens that at least has that component to it. So we really have a good time. We have an opportunity all the time to speak to very interesting people who are doing great work. Some of it is like smack dab in the middle of this journey of faith. And some of it is sort of tangential or peripheral to that. So we'll find out where this particular guest lands. But we are here today with Dorothy Littell Greco. Let me read you her quick bio. She writes about how the gospel is meant to change everything. Her most recent book, For the Love of Women, focuses on misogyny. She is a member of Redbud Writers Guild. Dorothy has also worked as a professional photographer for more than 40 years. When she's not rearranging words or making photos, she loves to kayak, travel, bike, and concoct gluten-free desserts. You can find more of her work on her website, DorothyGreco.com, or by following her on Instagram at Dorothy L. Greco, or Facebook, Words and Images by Dorothy Greco. Her latest book, For the Love of Women, Uprooting and Healing Misogyny in America, is what we're here to talk about. So welcome to the podcast. Dorothy, how are you today?
As I mentioned earlier, not feeling awesome, but very happy to be with you.
Well, we are glad that you powered through. My whole family is currently dealing with strep and RSV, and my wife has been battling like cedar allergies, which if you've never lived in Texas or been in Texas, cedar is terrible stuff. And so for a month, she's just been on the verge of going to the doctor because she just can't shake this cough. But we're coming up on the other side of it. And you live nearby one of my favorite cities in the world. It's a very close second to New York, but I really do love Boston, especially Boston in the spring. My goodness. So we're glad that you are sharing that with us today. I hope you get to feeling better. But just as a jumping off point, we like to talk to people about sort of their origin story, their background. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little bit about your faith journey, that would be a great way to kick things off, and we'll go from there.
I think that I began to pursue God long before I knew that I was pursuing God. I'm somebody who is highly sensitive and deeply connected to nature. So where we live, where I grew up in New Jersey, which was at the time, very rural area, we had a little woods behind our house with a stream and some rocks. And I would go up there, I don't know, almost every day with my cat and just explore and make little forts. And there was something about that space that was very nurturing and healing and very expansive, just kind of opened me up to something bigger than me. And it wasn't until freshman year in college that I could identify what that bigger than me force was. And for me, it's been God and Jesus in particular. So for the past 46 years now, I have been doing my best to understand what being a follower of Jesus means and to live that out in a way that is integrous and serves other people. So that, in a nutshell, is my faith journey.
That's great. Would you describe your upbringing as more traditional, or was it a little bit more, for lack of a better word, progressive? Were you given some freedom to sort of explore options in and outside of the church?
Yeah, I think that as with many people during that time period, I'm in my 60s, so I grew up in the 1960s. Going to church was often a part of people's lives. The town where I grew up was very small, very poor mining community, actually, agriculture and mining. And there was a synagogue, a Catholic church, and a Presbyterian church, which is really interesting. My parents chose Presbyterian. That was what was most familiar to them. So we did grow up going to Sunday school, but church for me during that time was more about strawberry shortcake bake-offs and fish fries and funeral services, Christmas pageants. I had since learned that both the pastor at that time and the youth pastor were actually very, very solid believers. But it was either just not going in, or it wasn't presented in a way that I could hear it and understand it. So I think that my parents endeavored to be good people. There was no, we didn't pray together. We didn't read the Bible together. They're nominal Christians, I guess is what I would call them. So it wasn't until, again, I got to college that I really began to study and seek and learn more about what the call to be a Christian really meant.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do that in college? Were you involved in a college group, or were you always a curious person? How did you foster that?
I'm always curious. Yeah.
Okay.
I love learning. And during high school, there was one, and I mean just one. I come from a small town, but there was one student who was in all of my classes, and he was an apologist, and he took advantage of every opportunity to share his faith. There'd be a break in the social studies history teaching, and he would say, "Did you know that?" And then launch into something that was perhaps connected to Christianity, but maybe not. And but he was really smart, but he was the only one I knew, and so it didn't have a whole lot of credibility until I got to college. And then when I got to college, I played college sports, and there were several of my teammates who were also people of faith, and so suddenly it became a little bit more real to me. And then when I was at school, I started going to church on a regular basis and, began to just take in and try to find my way into a space that was felt the most natural to me.
You just wrote this book for the love of women, and it has to do with misogyny. Did you experience misogyny in your faith journey and church life, and how did that impact you?
Yeah, I've experienced misogyny ever since I was a very little girl.
Yeah.
And in many ways, that's a big part of the motivation for writing this book. It's not a memoir, but it does explore some of the ways that I have experienced misogyny. In church, absolutely. There are so many stories I can tell you about what it means to be a woman trying to find her space, her faith in the midst of a church community that is perhaps very hostile to strong women. I've had good experiences too, and that's part of why I continue to attend church. But there have been a lot of experiences. There's one that I tell in the book. It was only just a couple years ago. So I was asked to preach, I thought, at a small church for Mother's Day, because then it's okay, for women to speak. And the week of, when I sent in the slides for the talk, the person who was the administrator sent my husband, not me, but my husband, a message saying, I just want to be clear, your wife is not preaching, she's sharing. And I thought, okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. If it's just about the word choice, I don't have to say that I'm preaching. And then there was another email saying that, it's only the pastor who's able to preach with authority from the pulpit. And then I sort of thought, well, then why do you want me to share? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, talk about decorations or what I made for dinner last night? Like, I don't understand why you even invited me to do this. So there's those kind of things where it feels like in order to be a strong woman, we have to get smaller. And I think that that's been a lot of what my experiences have looked like. It's clear when I read the room, it's not okay for me to have the depth of experience or the depth of knowledge or the opinions that I have, because it will make people uncomfortable. And so I have to kind of read the room and get smaller so that I can even be in the room.
The first time I preached a sermon, I really justified it as sharing my heart, because I had so much internalized misogyny that I was swimming in, essentially. It was really difficult for me to disassociate my body and myself from what I had been taught and what I had accepted as the only form forward. Have you ever had internalized misogyny that you've had to wrestle through and get through? And how does that work for you, or how has that worked?
Yeah, I think that what I just mentioned is internalized misogyny, the sense that men's values, men's opinions, men's thoughts are more important. And so I need to dial myself down so that I don't offend. That I think is internalized misogyny. And apart from the church, the sense that I, as a woman, particularly at this age, like I'm invisible because I'm not seen as attractive. I'm not seen as, fill in the blank, by men in this culture. That's internalized misogyny as well.
In the book, you start off with talking about misogyny within healthcare. And you talk a little bit about yourself and being kind of dismissed for having health issues. What's that like? I mean, what's that like growing up where you're just like dismissed, as opposed to being taken serious? You have to you're your own advocate, but you're getting no feedback. You talk about at the beginning of the book where most healthcare professionals are men, not very many women. So you're dealing with men already. And what's that like?
It's crushing.
Yeah.
It's crushing, particularly when the stakes are high, like with healthcare. So I've had health issues now for 25 years. And I think it mostly stems from the fact that I had celiac that wasn't diagnosed until I was 42. And during high school and college, whenever because I did make forays into the medical field to say, like, something is wrong, my digestive system isn't working. I was super skinny. Couldn't gain weight. And that was because I was having diarrhea all the time. And when I was at college and I went to see, it was part of a teaching university. So I went in there, and what the doctor said was, you're just anxious. And the way that you need to deal with your anxiety is just to eat more things like white bread.
Wow.
Which, of course, was the absolute worst thing that he could have told me. And then it took another 20 plus years for me to actually receive a diagnosis. So again, there's the sense that men know better than me. Men know better than me what my body is saying, what my experiences are. I knew that I wasn't an anxious person. I was getting anxious because of all the health issues and the fact that people weren't listening to me, but I wasn't by nature an anxious person. So that sense of, again, a doctor seeing, well, this is how I'm reading your symptoms and I'm telling you what's wrong without listening to you and without drawing you out. And the healthcare system in and of itself is just horribly broken, regardless of you're a man or a woman. But it's particularly true that women have a much more difficult time being listened to and not being interrupted. Our pain levels aren't taken as seriously as men's. There have been numerous studies that have shown when women go into the ER with heart attack symptoms, that they're more likely to be sent for a psych eval than they are to have blood tests that would show that they're actually having a heart attack. So there's a lot of evidence that, backs up the fact that within the healthcare system, there is misogyny, and it's changing. I think that as more women become doctors and PAs, there is a sense that, women's stories and women's needs are being valued more. But I've also had female doctors who have been very misogynistic too.
Yeah, the correlation that you kind of, it seemed like you were teasing out in this about endometriosis and these internal painful diagnoses that women experience and how it's correlated. It could be correlated with the idea of hysteria that would have put women in these insane asylums essentially for sometimes the rest of their lives. I almost started crying when I was reading that.
Yeah, absolutely shocking.
Oh, totally. And I mean, the way that you wrote this book is absolutely beautiful. I was engaged the entire time. I felt like there was so much good information for women out there, for women who are trying to understand themselves better, understand the society we live in better. How do we hold ourselves upright in a society that is oftentimes placing so much weight upon women's shoulders, and then also placing us in a closet and putting us far away from anybody else. And I really appreciated also how you wrote how misogyny affects men and how that does affect them and how they show up in this world. What emotions are they allowed to project and feel and talk about? I actually, when I was reading it this morning, I called my husband and I was like, I need to read this to you. This is so good. And I don't have a question there. I was just wanting to tell you how important this was. I mean, if anybody's listening, like this book is really, really good.
Well, let's talk about how it affects me.
Yeah, please.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, can you identify ways that it has impacted you?
Yeah, I think so. So raised in a society that values men's opinions, obviously higher than women's, I had to learn to become an ally and an advocate for my wife and my daughters. I mean, it was something that thankfully I married a very strong woman who wasn't about to take any of my bullshit. And so I was going to say that when we had our first child, she and I both took a crash course in how little women are paid attention to in a hospital setting, especially in something like childbirth, where they're like, well, women have been doing this for eons and women have been dying doing this for eons as well. And usually because they're not being listened to and because they're not being, so she was, my best story is I joined the Air Force when she was pregnant, with my first daughter, but I'm just a young airman. I'm just a nobody. And we're having our second daughter at an Air Force base in Maryland. And this very, very busy, very, very really dismissive military doctor comes in to oversee our midwife. And my wife, John knows. John's known my wife for, pushing 40 years. And when he began to try and change some things and insert himself into that situation, she told him in very colorful language to go pound sand. And I was just shaking. I'm like, I don't know, this is a major or a colonel or something. And it's like, yeah, but he's not in my chain of command. And so all of that is to say that whatever I know or whatever I'm learning about how to be a good advocate and or ally, I've had to learn. Not learning it from the culture. I'm not learning it. My father is, in a lot of ways, was always different in that sense. But my mom and him have a very hierarchical relationship. Dad's in charge. I don't think, and a lot of that bled over in the little things like I drive all the time and I make decisions. But my dad wasn't afraid to wash a dish or, get on the floor and, clean something. And there was not that sort of division of labor in our house, but there certainly was a division of authority. And we were taught implicitly anyway that Dad's opinion carried more weight.
Yeah.
So,
and back to the Air Force days when your wife was having the second child. Tell us, did you have any paternity leave?
No, hell no. No, I was back to work the next day.
Yeah. So there again is an example of misogyny of saying like you as a father are not important in the family system. So you have to go back to work as opposed to saying, A, your wife needs the support, but B, you got to get to know your daughter. Yeah. So again, that's an inbuilt way that misogyny harms men and women. Yeah.
My son just had a baby and my daughter and her husband had a baby not too long ago. And he got 2 weeks of paternity leave. And I think my son's wife, who is an engineer, she had like 6 or 8 weeks of maternity leave, which
That's
sounds
great.
like a lot.
Not enough, but
Not
that's
enough,
great.
but it was paid.
Right.
And yeah, we didn't get any of that. I mean, our kids were all born in the 90s and, our last one in 2000. Yeah, there was none of that. But the other thing though, and John, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but there's probably a million other ways that this sort of cultural approach to this has affected us that we haven't even taken the time to identify, that we don't necessarily notice until it begins to come out. So I don't know. There's probably a lot more stuff. John, I cut you off, buddy. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to, kind of agree with you. My wife, with our third child, she's had 2 kids. She's on her third one. And we go into the hospital and she tells, unfortunately, our midwife was not available. She was having a medical issue with her daughter. So we were being seen by the OBGYN the doctor who wasn't there. And my wife called the doctor, the babies will be here in 30 minutes. And they're like, well, we know better than you, how you're feeling. We'll come back in about 20 or 30 minutes and we'll check on you. And they came back in 20 minutes and realized, they have minutes to call the doctor. And I mean, it's just little things like that where they're not listening to a woman who knows their body better than anybody else. And my wife is literally saying this baby's coming in 30 minutes. All of my pregnancies have been fast. And they just didn't want to believe it.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting tie-in here. So back prior to the time when medical system in the United States became industrialized, which was like 1880s, it's when the transition started to happen. Most of the midwives in our country were women, and they were often Black women. And so they served not only their community, but everybody's community. They had this knowledge that they carried with them and experience. And then as male doctors realized, like, we could monetize helping women give birth. And they pushed and discredited those women out of the way. You can tie the Black mortality rate in delivery, labor and delivery, to that. And that, again, so, you see there an overlap of racism and misogyny that is still playing itself out today, which is horrible.
I mean, the monetization of healthcare in this country is egregious anyway. I mean, the fact that this is a for-profit system still boggles my mind. And unfortunately, I think I read a statistic the other day that the overwhelming majority of people who go into bankruptcy in this country, it's because of medical debt.
I believe it.
My daughter, when she was 19, got very, very sick and spent months in the hospital. She was bankrupt before she was 20. I mean, she had millions of dollars in medical debt that by the time we were done, we just said, okay, good luck. I mean,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, what else did you?
Yeah, I'm like, you can't get blood from a stone. So, I mean, it's now granted, the good news is she's well, better. She's better.
I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but there's another situation where your daughter not being listened to as she's coming in and saying there's something seriously wrong with me.
Yeah.
And they send her away with antibiotics. They send her away with an inhaler because it seems to be some form of asthma.
Yeah.
And then
she went to her local, so she was in college at the time, and she went to her the college had a little clinic. And that was mistake number one. But yeah, by the time they figured out that she was dying, they were, putting her on a jet and flying her to Austin. And, thankfully they're surrounded by a bunch of really smart women. like her pulmonologist is one of the smartest women I have ever encountered in my life. Just a stone cold genius. Saved her life, But here's what's, and I don't know if it was a function of her age, because everyone seems very young to me, but she seemed to be in her maybe mid-30s, just rock star pulmonologist. But my daughter's cardiologist was 50-ish, silvery gray, very well put together guy. And when he walked in the room, he didn't listen to anybody. Like, he shoved his weight around, dismissed my daughter, like, out of hand. Like, which was easy to do for the first 2 months because she was in a coma. But after that, he had to learn to deal with the woman who could talk. And my daughter has very, very strong opinions about literally everything. But in that medical profession, that old guard hierarchy still seems to be, very, very well in place. But when we talk about, let's talk about the women of color, people of color in general, the mythology that surrounds pain tolerance and women in general. There is this prevailing sort of thought that women are more tolerant to pain. It's just because they've had to. I don't think you're superhuman. I just think you've been put through too much shit. But there also was this around women of color and people of color in general. There was this mythology that prevails even in some circles now that they don't experience pain the same way that quote unquote normal folks do. Is there? I don't know if that's an element of that misogyny / racism or where those things just sort of begin to bleed together, but that seems to be still kind of happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm spacing on the doctor's name, but he's known as the father of gynecology. Like he did experiments on enslaved women, gynecological experiments, without giving them any kind of pain relief at all. And of course, they couldn't even give consent because they were enslaved. And that went on for years.
Yeah.
So the notion of how he brutalized these women for the sake of research, is what he was saying. But the reality is it wasn't until recently that people began to speak up about this. And I think it was in New York City that a statue of him was removed because there was no reflection at all about the ways that he harmed so many women.
Yeah. Well, you think about what happened to the Tuskegee Airmen, those sorts of brutal, savage, and then what we did to Native Americans in boarding schools. Our history is not good in this. All the more reason why we need to be talking about this more. Let's talk about autonomy, though, too. I'm not sure if you've touched on this much when it comes to the overturning of Roe v. Wade and how much power and choice that has stripped from women. What do you see as this sort of short-term and long-term effect of forcing women into these roles?
I think that when in that section of the chapter on the government, there's, as Nat is referring to, there's a section on abortion. That was probably the hardest section of the entire book to write, if I'm completely honest. I would say that I probably spent an entire week rewriting that and rewriting it because I knew that it was such an important section. I think that what stands out to me is when you look historically at the different Supreme Court cases that have come down and see that essentially what their government is saying is, you just make your decision on your own and we don't want to have anything to do with it. So that is offering women autonomy of making their own choice, which is good and important, obviously. But it's also saying, I don't want to take care of you. I don't want to have anything to do with your needs as a pregnant woman or as a mother. And to me, that's where the crime is. And that's where I would like the conversation to focus is not so much are you pro or you versus abortion, but what is it that we as a culture can do to change things so that when women want to carry a child, they have more support and they're not just completely on their own, that the government pays for 100% of delivery. Like that there's no cost. No woman should have to pay any cost if she's delivering a baby, and that there would be government subsidized childcare for those families who need it. So I think what happens now is, in this process of, is it going to come down from the federal government? Is it going to be a state? It seems based on Dobbs that it's going to now default to state choice. There's simply not enough support for women, and all the burden of all the responsibility of bearing children rests on us. So to me, it's not a surprise that some women would have a felt need for an abortion. Men are not held responsible in any way. Biologically, like they are the ones who are responsible for impregnating a woman, and yet the woman has to bear all the responsibility. So somehow, I think as a country, we have to find the balance of allowing women to make choices, but at the same time holding men more responsible. And like the notion of which state is it where they were talking about the death penalty for women who had abortions. I just think like, you have got to be kidding me. Like this is like handing, the adulterer a stone, as opposed to saying, no, wait a minute, you are responsible in this situation. It's just that to me, that is such an example, strong example of misogyny.
Well, it's crazy too. And sadly, I think Texas is one of those states that is at least considered that measure. But I think it's Louisiana or another deep South state that's actually put one on the books. But we're also trying to criminalize. They tried to sneak past a measure in Texas, a year ago, that would have criminalized crossing state borders to seek medical attention like that. And it would have also basically required you to inform on your neighbors if you knew that was happening.
Yeah, that's just that kind of authoritarian state just gets so dangerous.
I tell you what they're doing though, and here's the only positive I see in all this, is there's a generation of rabid feminists who are coming up. And the overturning of Roe v. Wade has catalyzed a lot of these women, my wife included, by the way, who is the most traditional, has been up to like the last couple of years, always been a very traditional, sees herself as a very traditional wife and mom. Man, she is livid with the state of the world and how we value, or more actually how we devalue women, and how we have taken away choice and stripped their autonomy away and forced them into these roles. And I think it's an easy place for a Christian to say, I don't like that. You can say, I don't like abortion. I don't agree with. There's a lot of things I don't agree with that I wouldn't do for myself, that I would hope my daughters would not choose. But it's not my choice, And I don't get to stand in judgment of people who make choices that are best for their life in the moment. And one thing that age gives you, hopefully, is a little bit of empathy that comes from experience and wisdom, and just having to see people make hard choices. So I don't know. I have no idea what the way forward looks like. I know that I'm praying for November to have some sort of seismic, shake up of what's happening in our government. But none of that's going to change, the immediate needs of people. I don't know. Yeah.
And why aren't we asking the question like, well, what is it that motivates women to feel like they need to have an abortion? Is it simply, this is not the right time in my life? Or is it, I don't think that I have the capacity to support a child, the finances, whatever. And if that's the case, then why are we not doing a better job, both governmentally, societally, church-wise?
Yeah.
There's so many churches that will speak vociferously against abortion, but yet they don't support the child post-birth. They're not supporting the foster care system. They're not supporting adoption. They're not supporting childcare. So to me, that is hypocritical.
Absolutely.
I am somebody who is pro-life across the board. So I'm opposed to the death penalty. I am opposed to abortion. I know that, sounds like we don't agree on that. But I also feel like there has to be more conversation about this. And we can't simply push to the binaries of being pro or against.
Yeah,
there's such a deep, deep need for greater support and for more conversations on this.
Well, and the data bears it out that, and again, I cut you off. I'm sorry, Don. I'll be quick. But the data bears out that when we talk about this more, when we provide things like, sex education that is, comprehensive, and when we make access to birth control free and easy, it's not a blip on the radar that abortion rates go down under more liberal administrations where things like this are being talked about. And then all of a sudden, when prohibition comes back around again, wow, what do you know? The rates jump back up. So if we really cared about this stuff, the church would be a big advocate of real comprehensive sex education, age appropriate, and whatever intervention we can do as early as possible. So we don't put women in these situations where they have to make these really, really hard and life-changing decisions. But John, I cut you off, man. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say it's become cliche now, but I mean, they're not pro-life, they're pro-birth.
Oh yeah, of course.
And everything after the birth of the child is none of their business, and they don't want to help out at all.
Unless that child's gay. Sorry, we weren't going to go this way.
And to your point, though, what you said, to help them be more autonomous, but with the women in these situations, but we are not holding men accountable for their part of this, and that's another part of misogyny, is not holding men accountable for their like you said, the woman can't get pregnant without a man involved. But then that's the end of their involvement. And then they can just divorce themselves from it as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's why one of the reasons why in the book I talk about the need for offering condoms everywhere for free, and women getting to the point where, couples have the conversation and saying, do we want to have a child? If we don't want to have a child, then we need to use birth control. That, rather than seeing abortion as the last ditch effort as a form of birth control, which I know, again, for some people, that is how they see it. But in my opinion, if every man who did not want to be a father used a condom, that would make a big difference.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this too. We talk about systemic racism. I mean, it's dismissed out of hand by a lot of people, but we do talk about it. I almost never hear about institutional or systemic misogyny. I mean, it's a little crazy to me, the hoops that women have to jump through. I had a friend who knew when she was 20 that she didn't want to have kids, and try getting a tubal ligation as a 20-year-old female and not having to jump through a million hoops to get a doctor to perform that very basic, fairly simple procedure. Wasn't until she got married and she got her husband's permission. This was in the 2020s, man. She essentially had to have her husband, vouch for her. But I mean, when it comes to things like property ownership and even the ability for women to establish their own lines of credit is a fairly recent development. How deep does this run if it's that deeply entrenched in even our government and our culture?
It's deep. I mean, if you think about when they wrote the Constitution, women were not given the right to vote.
Yeah, they weren't even 3/5 of a person. Golly.
Yeah, at the very beginning, they dismissed the reality that women were part of the country, that women were an important part of the country, and still they felt like, no, we cannot give them the right to vote. I talk about in the book coverture, which is from a French term, which means covered. And that was part of our, American culture long before we became a country. And what that essentially involves is that when a woman and man marry, the man subsumes the woman, that she becomes part of him. And one of the things, the really horrible components of that is that up until, I believe the last state was 1991, is that husbands could rape their wives with total impunity because in the legal system, you can't rape yourself. Like, you tell me that that's not misogyny on so many different levels, like that a court where they're supposed to be understanding the law for the benefit of the people could interpret the law in that way is astonishing. And again, I'm pretty sure it's like 1991 that the last state abolished the fact that a husband could rape his wife with impunity.
I mean, there are still states where women and young girls as young as 12 or 13 can get married.
Right.
And that can't be right. I mean, we're very backwards in a lot of these ways. Yeah, it is astonishing. That's the only word I agree with you, that some of these things still hang around and linger.
I mean, take that right up to the Epstein files.
Oh my goodness.
They're talking about these girls, and they're saying the very first case that came forward in Florida, they referred to her as a prostitute. She was 14 years old. Right? And she was clearly, like, there was so much evidence that she had been sexually abused by Epstein. And what they said was that his original charge was that he paid for prostitution for underage. That's not the same thing. Like, rape is not the same thing as prostitution. No. So again, it's that sense of men having the right to do what they want with women's bodies and women's needs, and health is less important.
Yeah, it feels like there's like, it's more acute. Well, it's always been acute, I suppose, in the course of our history, but it seems like it's more obvious lately with the Epstein files coming out, and the way that people are either ignoring it or moving on from it or not holding people accountable. And that's been really hard for me to see, especially my conservative siblings who have been so vocal against abortion for so long. and so vocal about children's rights and making sure kids are protected and taken care of, and against human trafficking and sex trafficking, and creating movies about it and everything, and like making sure that's out there. And yet radio silence. And I'm still just blown away that they're not protesting in front of courthouses every freaking day, like they do in Planned Parenthood. And just like, we're going to take down the man that has caused these things and causing these cover-ups. So it's been really, really challenging for me, especially, but I'm curious about with all of this work that you've done, putting this book together and researching everything and kind of seeing what our history is in the United States and what it is like for women today, even. How have you been able to take care of your own heart and soul? Like, how do you make sure that you don't get overwhelmed by the great amounts of research that you've had to do?
Oh, I do get overwhelmed.
Okay.
I do get overwhelmed on a regular basis. Part of that is because I'm a highly sensitive person. Part of that is because injustice is what motivates me. That's like on the Enneagram, I'm a 1. And so that's the thing that most motivates me more than anything else. So it took me about 18 months to write the book. And if you were to ask my husband, he would concur that that was probably some of the angriest that I have ever been in the course of our 35-year marriage. You know, I would come downstairs at the end of the day and just say, can I share with you something that I learned today? It's overwhelming. You know, there are so many, the book has a lot of personal stories in it, talking to women, hearing their pain, identifying with them, connecting the dots with my own experiences with misogyny, and then just seeing how deeply systemic and how so many men are just unwilling to have the conversation. And I think one of the motivating factors for the book, like I am not promoting misandry in this book by no means. I feel like I'm really careful about not blaming men and not throwing men under the bus, because I feel like we need men to come alongside of us if we're going to diminish misogyny. So trying to find those men, trying to find the advocates, the allies, the interrupters who are willing to have the conversations was much more difficult than I imagined. And even since the book is released, you know, I will not name names, but there were quite a few men who had said, I will help you promote this book. I will do whatever I can to get the book out there. And then I send the book to them and absolute crickets, you know, no response, absolutely ghosted. And I understand it's a controversial book. And if their name is associated with it, you know, they may suffer some flack. And I think that's what I'm saying is, because I as a woman have been suffering my entire life. So if you'd be willing to put your neck on the line for 10 minutes, that'd be awesome.
Wow. That must be very disheartening to.
It is.
Yeah. To have people that you thought would be in your corner and to advocate for these really important subjects. And yet they are more concerned about how others might perceive them instead. And that's really frustrating.
And that's the spiritual journey for me, Bethany, is that I have to continue to recognize I'm growing bitter. I'm growing resentful. I can hear the cynicism as I talk. And so I need to continue to go before God and, you know, confess my sins, confess my feelings of resentment or bitterness to my husband or my friends so that it doesn't take root and make me somebody I don't want to be.
But there have been some women that have come alongside us. I saw that Beth Allison Barr she read the foreword for your book.
Women have been very supportive.
We're big fans of her. And in fact, she was one of the first, probably one of the first women we had on after who wrote Jesus and John Wayne. Gosh darn it.
Kristen Kobes-Dumay.
Yeah. But she said something that I thought was very, very important, and it's become sort of a moniker for John and I, is that because we grew up in the church world where our version of feminism was complementarianism, you know, where we were all just, we're all just specially equipped to do our own little roles and play our own. And she was like, no, that's complementarianism is misogyny. It's patriarchy. There's no difference. Is that something that you've encountered, first of all? And second of all, is that something that you would push back a ton on and say, nah?
Sorry, can you clarify your question?
Just the idea of complementarianism, that we, that men and women are equipped differently to do different things and to, lead differently or I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, the reality is we are different. We
Sure.
can't deny the fact that we are different and we're capable of doing different things bodily wise. I think the notion that like men's brains are little compartments with doors that can neatly open and close, and women's brains are like spaghetti, which I'm forgetting who it was who had that illustration in one of his talks. I think that's, those are gross generalizations. My husband and I are probably less typical masculine, feminine. I'm a very linear thinker. I'm probably the one who would have the boxes in my brain, and he's very Italian. He's very feelings oriented. He talks with his hands. He has big emotions. He uses 10 times more words than me. So I think for us, I don't know. To me, the complementarian can just be such a way to hold women down and such a way to enforce patriarchy, to enforce hierarchies. So how is it that we can acknowledge, yes, we are different. We're probably more different, again, not talking about bodies and biology, but in terms of how we think in our spirits, there's probably a lot more room, or should be a lot more room, for us to be our unique selves than American culture and the American church offers us, right? So if within a church system, what gets communicated is that the women are only capable of teaching children or teaching boys up until they're whatever age they decide that they can't teach them anymore, 14 or 15, which always has felt absurd to me. That's the message that gets passed down to our children and to our girls. And then we're inculcating an entire next generation of this is what it means to be a man and this is what it means to be a woman, and never the twain shall cross. So in terms of church leadership, I don't think that's healthy, because when you have all men, dominating the decisions that are being made, it's a setup for abuse. It's a setup for some pretty significant mistakes to be made if you're not paying attention to what women are experiencing or thinking. But then in terms of, intimate relationships, to have that level of hierarchies, I don't see that can be supported biblically at all. I think it's clear to me that what God is calling us into is partnerships, whether it's marriage or work or church, that when we see each other as equals and when we approach the things that we're called to, recognizing other people as our equal versus us being better than, it's just going to go better and it's going to be more fun.
Yeah. Well, and you talk a little bit about this too. You talk about the Me Too movement and the Church Too movement. And it's just another point where men don't listen to women, don't listen to their stories, don't take them at their face value as facts. And this goes all the way to the Epstein files as well. But did you see any kind of correlation between the Me Too movement and the church movement and the church abuse? Did it help bring that out, or did it bring men out in more force to try to hide more of this abuse?
I think both, really. Like I'm sure that you've read the Houston Chronicles long series on the Southern Baptists. I think that was 2019. But if you really go through and read that entire series, it's a lot of reading. But the ways that the Southern Baptists covered up the abusers while choosing both not to believe the women and to malign them. I mean, it wasn't just that they said like, oh, no, that's not true. There's nothing to see here. They did like horrible damage to these women who had already been deeply, deeply harmed. Unconscionable to me, again, that these men would stand in the pulpit on Sunday morning and preach the good news, and then at their meeting on Saturday night that they would call these women horrible names and say that they were liars and that they were out to thwart, the reason that the whole Southern Baptists existed. It's just the divide that these men must have in their heads is shocking. The lack of empathy. I think to your point, John, that, men wouldn't be willing to listen to a woman come in and talk about the ways that she has been abused and feel just brokenhearted. That's what Jesus would want. I think he would want those men to weep with the women who shared their stories, not accuse them of being liars or accuse them of being manipulators and cause further harm to them. So I think that the Me Too Church Too movement opened the door a little bit wider, helped people to see this is really deep. This isn't just the Catholic Church. This isn't just Harvey Weinstein, a one-off. It is everywhere. And what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, the amount of corruption in this world and sin in this world has infiltrated the church, and the church is just a perfect place to hide and to cover it up, because if the ministry is good, if everything looks like it's successful, if people are coming to the Lord and more people are being baptized, then you don't want to stop the ministry of God. So you just hide it, you cover it, you gaslight the girls, the women, the people that have been terrorized in many ways. And then, of course, you get enough people to question that person's character, and you just keep moving on without any consequence. And I think that when things are uncovered, that's a beautiful thing, because the only way that people can find healing is when secrets no longer exist. The problem is it just doesn't feel like anything's changing. And that's frustrating. I feel like things just keep getting covered up. Even when they're exposed, people make excuses for them or, go on to the next news cycle. And I don't feel like things are changing as rapidly as I wish they were. But I'm thinking when we read books like this, when we engage with the historical undercurrent of brokenness that has been in this world, and when we can actually see what it is and start advocating for the people who have been harmed, then that's when change happens. It's slow and steady, but it's nothing to give up on.
Right. Yeah, I can't give up. If I give up, then I feels like, well, then what's the point? Like if the gospel isn't motivating me towards justice and towards healing and towards restoration, then I want no part of it, because, it's not worth it to me to just go to church on Sunday morning and sing some songs and hear a good message. That feels pointless.
I can't do it. I just can't. I can't participate in that kind of a system anymore.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
That feels like a perfect place to stop, because I can't say it any better than that. As much as I would like to, the misogyny in me says have the last word. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm grateful. What faith I have left in the church lies in the women of the church, and in particular women like Bethany and like you, Dorothy, who are standing up and saying, "Nah, no more. That we've gone far enough with this." So if there's going to be any change, it's going to be from a groundswell of women who stand their ground and say, "Hell no."
And we need the men. We need the men to have these deep conversion experiences where they feel gutted. Maybe they weren't the ones who committed these horrible crimes, but that they feel gutted because of what happened to their sisters and their mothers and their wives, and that they are willing to take any number of risks in order to come alongside of us and say, we're going to do whatever it takes.
Yeah. And it's not just for the women. I think it's for the men. I mean, to shift the narrative for them as well, that they have, that they are larger than their rage and anger. They can feel their feelings and model the way forward for another generation that needs to know what it's like to actually be a real man. It's not somebody who's aggressive and violent. It is a person who is sensitive and willing to stand up for the vulnerable in their lives.
Because that's who Jesus was, right?
Yep.
Well, we should be leading the charge on all of this Epstein bullshit. It should all, the men who are advocating their responsibility in this they will rue the day. They will rue that decision. It's going to come back to roost. And I only hope I'm there to see it, because again, I can start to go, you had it coming. No, but I do have a lot of hope, and the hope is in this next generation of women. And I appreciate the work. Thank you so much for the book, For the Love of Women. This is Dorothy Littell Greco. I hope I said that maiden name correct.
You did.
Okay. I have a friend whose name is Luttrell, but she always corrects me and they say it Luttrell. So what do I know? John, Bethany, any parting words of wisdom?
I'd just like to say thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with us. It's been an amazing conversation, timely, needed.
Absolutely.
And just thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, particularly Bethany, for what you brought to the table today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very grateful for the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into this book. And I know that it came at quite a cost to you.
It was
absolutely
the hardest professional project I have ever done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could feel it when I was reading it. I was like, this must have hurt. It's like, it's so needed though. It's so needed to be read and to be engaged with. And, I think a lot of, not just men need to read this, women do, because there is so much internalized misogyny that lives within us. And it is easier to ignore the suffering around us if we ourselves as women aren't experiencing that suffering acutely. We can pretend that it doesn't exist. And I don't think that's helpful for anybody. So I appreciate you doing the hard work, and I will continue forth in that as well. So thank you, Dorothy.
We'll make sure and link to everything in our show notes, make sure people have a way to connect with you, and obviously promote the heck out of the book. Recommend it to everybody that we talk to. Other than that, just want to echo everybody's appreciation and thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.